Imagine standing at the bottom of a tree so tall that when you look up, the top seems to disappear into the clouds. Now imagine that somewhere near the top of that tree is a huge colony of wild bees. And the only way to reach the honey is to climb hundreds of feet above the ground. No elevator, no safety platform, no modern equipment, just a rope, a few basic tools, years of experience, and an incredible amount of courage. Welcome to one of the most dangerous and fascinating traditional activities in the world, wild honey hunting. Today, we are going deep into the jungle to follow an extreme honey hunting adventure, where a giant tree becomes the hunter's workplace, the forest becomes his kitchen, and one small mistake could have serious consequences. This is not simply a story about collecting honey. It is a story about patience. It is a story about tradition. It is a story about survival. And most importantly, it is a story about humans facing nature at its most powerful. So stay with me until the end, because what happens high above the jungle floor is something most people would never dare to experience. Our journey begins deep inside a thick rainforest. The environment here is completely different from the world most of us know. There are no busy roads. There are no tall buildings. There are no supermarkets where you can simply walk in and buy a jar of honey. Instead, there are enormous trees, thick vegetation, insects, birds, wild animals, and thousands of sounds coming from every direction. The jungle looks peaceful from a distance, but once you enter it, you quickly realize that the forest is alive. Every branch moves, every sound has a meaning, and every step needs attention. The honey hunter knows this environment much better than an ordinary visitor. He has spent years learning how to move through the forest, where bees usually build their colonies, which trees are strong enough to climb, and which areas should be avoided. For him, the jungle is not just a dangerous place, it is also a source of food. Wild honey can be extremely valuable, especially in communities where traditional honey hunting has been practiced for generations. But finding honey is only the beginning. The real challenge starts when the honey is located high above the ground. After traveling through the jungle, the hunter finally reaches an enormous tree. And this is not an ordinary tree. It rises roughly 100 meters into the sky. To understand just how high that is, imagine a building with around 25 to 30 floors. Now imagine that building is not made of concrete. It is a living tree. Its trunk is massive. Its branches spread in different directions. And somewhere near the upper sections of this giant structure is the prize the hunter has been searching for. Wild honey. At first, the honey colony may be almost impossible to see from the ground. The hunter has to carefully study the tree. He looks at the branches. He looks for bee activity. He listens. He watches where the bees are flying. And eventually he identifies the location of the colony. But now comes the difficult question. How do you reach a beehive that is hundreds of feet above the ground? Before climbing, preparation is extremely important. The hunter checks his equipment. He prepares ropes and tools. Every piece of equipment needs to be handled carefully because once he is high above the ground, there is very little room for mistakes. At ground level, a small problem can usually be corrected. At 100 meters in the air, the same problem can become extremely dangerous. The hunter also needs to understand the tree itself. Which branches are strong? Which branches are weak? Where can he place his feet? Where can he hold his rope? Where are the bees? And how can he safely return after collecting the honey? These are not questions that can be answered in a few minutes. They come from experience. Traditional honey hunters often develop skills over many years. They learn by watching older hunters. They learn by practicing. And they learn by understanding the behavior of bees in the forest. This knowledge cannot simply be replaced by courage. You can be brave and still make a dangerous mistake. That is why experience matters so much. The climb begins. Finally, the climb begins. The hunter starts moving upward. At first, it may look easy. The lower part of the tree is relatively close to the ground. But with every meter, the distance between the hunter and the forest floor increases. 20 meters, 30 meters, 40 meters. And still he continues. The ground begins to look smaller. The sounds of the jungle become different. The wind becomes stronger. The branches move beneath him. And the hunter has to remain focused. He cannot simply look down and admire the view. His attention has to remain on the next movement. One hand, one foot, one rope, one branch at a time. This is where the psychological challenge becomes just as important as the physical challenge. Most people would feel fear at this height. Even standing on a tall building can make your heart race. But here, the hunter is climbing a living structure. The tree is moving, the wind is moving, and the entire environment is changing around him, higher and higher. As the hunter climbs higher, the jungle begins to look completely different. From the ground, the forest appears like a solid wall of green, but from above, you can see layers of trees stretching into the distance. The canopy looks like a giant green ocean. The hunter is now moving through a world that most people rarely see. Birds may fly past him, insects surround him, branches sway in the wind, and somewhere ahead is the hive. But there is another problem. The bees know he is coming. As he approaches the colony, the sound begins to change. At first, it may be a soft buzzing, then louder and louder. The closer he gets, the more obvious it becomes that he is entering the territory of thousands of insects, facing the bees. Wild bees are not like bees inside a controlled farm environment. These colonies live naturally. They defend their home, and when they feel threatened, they can become extremely aggressive. The hunter must therefore approach carefully. He cannot simply grab the honeycomb. He needs to work strategically. Traditional honey hunters have developed methods for dealing with bees, often using smoke to make the bees less aggressive and easier to work around. The smoke does not magically make the bees disappear. Instead, it can help create a short window in which the hunter can work. And that window is precious, because the longer the hunter stays near the colony, the greater the chance of being attacked. Imagine standing hundreds of feet above the ground while thousands of bees are flying around you. You cannot simply run away. There is nowhere to run. Your only option is to remain calm and carefully continue the process. The honeycomb. Finally, the hunter reaches the hive. And now we see why he made the dangerous journey. Inside the colony is the wild honeycomb. Depending on the season, the colony can contain a surprisingly large amount of honey. The honeycomb is carefully removed. The hunter works with concentration. He needs to take enough honey to make the journey worthwhile, but he also has to be careful not to destroy the entire colony. This is an important part of traditional honey hunting. The forest must continue to provide. If every hive were completely destroyed, there would be no honey for the future. Responsible harvesting allows bees to continue living and producing honey. So this is not simply about taking something from nature. It is also about understanding nature. The hunter knows that the bees are part of the ecosystem. They pollinate flowers, they help plants reproduce, and they contribute to the health of the forest. The honey is valuable, but the bees themselves are even more important. The most dangerous moment. You might think the most dangerous part was reaching the hive. But there is another challenge waiting, coming back down. After spending time high above the jungle floor, the hunter now has to descend. His equipment may be heavier because of the honey. His body may be tired. His hands may be exhausted, and the weather can change at any moment. The wind can become stronger, the branches can become slippery, and one mistake can have devastating consequences. That is why the descent requires the same level of concentration as the climb. There is no moment when the hunter can completely relax. He must continue checking every step, every rope, every branch, every movement. Slowly, he begins to make his way down, the view from above. But despite the danger, there is something extraordinary about being up there. Imagine seeing the rainforest from 100 meters above the ground. The trees stretch in every direction. The sunlight passes through the leaves. The wind moves across the canopy. And far below, the jungle floor looks incredibly distant. For a moment, the hunter is standing between two worlds. Above him is the open sky. Below him is the forest. Around him are thousands of years of natural evolution. This is one of the reasons wild honey hunting is so fascinating. It combines physical skill with a deep connection to nature. The hunter is not controlling the environment. He is adapting to it. Why wild honey is so special? So why go through all this trouble for honey? Why climb such a dangerous tree when honey can be purchased from a store? The answer is tradition. For many communities, wild honey has been collected for generations. It can be used as food. It can be exchanged or sold. And traditionally, honey has also been valued for various household and cultural uses. But beyond its practical value, wild honey represents something else. It represents a connection between people and the natural world. Modern life has made many of us dependent on machines. If we want food, we go to a supermarket. If we want water, we turn on a tap. If we want transportation, we use a car. But traditional honey hunters operate differently. They enter the forest. They find the resource, they collect it, and they bring it back to their community. The entire process is physical. It requires knowledge, and it requires patience. The skills behind the adventure. It is easy to watch a video like this and say, That person is incredibly brave. And yes, courage is definitely part of it. But courage alone is not enough. The hunter needs balance. He needs strength. He needs rope handling skills. He needs to understand the tree. He needs to understand bees. He needs to understand weather conditions. And perhaps most importantly, he needs to control fear. Fear is not always a bad thing. Fear tells you that something is dangerous. A skilled person does not necessarily have no fear. Instead, he knows how to manage it. At 100 meters above the ground, panic could be extremely dangerous. A sudden movement could cause a loss of balance, so the hunter has to remain calm. He breathes, he focuses, and he takes the next step. The hidden world of honey hunting. There is also something beautiful about the fact that this traditional practice remains relatively unknown to much of the modern world. Most people see honey as a simple golden liquid inside a glass jar. But behind that jar can be an entire story. Somewhere deep in a rainforest, bees have built a colony. A person has spent years learning how to find it. That person has traveled through difficult terrain. He has climbed a giant tree. He has faced thousands of bees. And finally, he has brought the honey back down. Suddenly, honey is no longer just honey. It becomes a product of nature, skill, patience, and tradition. The danger of modern attention. There is also an important lesson here for viewers. Videos of extreme activities can look exciting. They can make us want to try the same thing. But watching an experienced honey hunter does not mean an untrained person should attempt the same climb. A 100-meter tree is not a normal climbing challenge. Without proper knowledge, equipment, experience, and local guidance, it can be extremely dangerous. Traditional skills often look simple after someone has mastered them. But behind that simplicity may be years of training. So the right way to appreciate this activity is not to copy it recklessly. It is to understand the skill behind it. A battle between human and nature? At first glance, wild honey hunting may look like a battle between humans and bees, but in reality, it is more complicated. The hunter does not truly defeat the bees. He works around them. He understands their behavior. He uses traditional techniques to reduce the danger. And he takes a portion of what the colony has produced. This relationship between humans and nature has existed for thousands of years. People have always depended on forests for food. The difference today is that modern technology has made many of us disconnected from where our food actually comes from. Wild honey hunting reminds us that nature is not a supermarket. Food does not simply appear. It comes from ecosystems, and those ecosystems require protection. The journey back down. Now the hunter is finally descending. The honey is secured. The work is almost finished, but the concentration remains. Slowly, carefully, he moves lower. 70 meters, 60 meters, 50, 40, 30. With every meter, the ground becomes closer. The pressure begins to disappear. The branches become thicker. The air feels different, and eventually the hunter reaches the lower part of the tree. Finally, his feet touch the ground. He has completed the journey. The honey that was once hidden high above the rainforest is now safely with him. But perhaps the biggest reward is not the honey. It is knowing that he successfully completed a tradition that requires extraordinary skill and courage. What we can learn from this. There is a much bigger lesson hidden inside this adventure. Nature rewards patience. The hunter cannot rush. He cannot force the bees. He cannot climb without thinking. Every part of the process requires patience. And that is something modern life often makes us forget. We live in a world where everything is expected instantly. Instant food, instant messages, instant entertainment, instant information. But the forest works differently. Trees take years to grow. Bees take time to build colonies. Honey takes time to produce. And traditional skills take years to master. The honey hunter understands this. He knows that patience is not wasted time. Patience is part of the process. Respect for traditional knowledge. Another important lesson is the value of traditional knowledge. Many skills that exist in remote communities are not written in books. They are passed from one generation to another. A young person watches an experienced hunter. He learns how to identify trees. He learns how bees behave. He learns how to use ropes. He learns which areas are safe. And eventually, he becomes experienced enough to teach someone else. This knowledge is a form of cultural heritage. As modern technology develops, it is important not to forget these traditional skills. They tell us how people lived with nature long before modern equipment existed. The bee's perspective. Now let's look at this adventure from another perspective. Imagine being one of the bees. Your colony is your home. You have spent weeks and months building the honeycomb. The colony is working together. Some bees collect nectar. Others care for the young. Others protect the entrance. Everything has a purpose. Then suddenly a human appears. The bees immediately react. They are not trying to be aggressive for no reason. They are defending their home. This is why the hunter needs to understand their behavior. The forest has its own rules, and the hunter is entering their world. Why the jungle matters. The rainforest itself is another important part of this story. A healthy forest provides homes for bees, birds, insects, mammals, and countless plants. When forests disappear, these ecosystems are damaged. And when ecosystems are damaged, traditional practices like wild honey hunting can also disappear. Protecting forests therefore means protecting more than trees. It means protecting entire communities of living organisms. It means protecting traditional cultures. And it means protecting the natural processes that provide food and resources. The honey hunter depends on the forest. The bees depend on the forest. And ultimately, humans everywhere depend on healthy ecosystems. The final lesson. So what did we really witness today? We saw a man climb an enormous tree. We saw him face thousands of wild bees. We saw him work hundreds of feet above the ground. And we saw him bring wild honey down from a place most people would never even consider reaching. But this is more than an extreme adventure. It is a reminder of human adaptability. For generations, people have learned how to survive in difficult environments by observing nature rather than trying to completely control it. The honey hunter does not change the forest. He changes himself to fit the forest. He learns its patterns. He respects its dangers. And he uses knowledge passed down through generations. That is what makes this tradition so remarkable. Closing. At the beginning of this journey, we asked a simple question. Would you climb a 100-meter tree just to collect wild honey? For most people, the answer would probably be no. And honestly, that is understandable. Standing hundreds of feet above the ground, surrounded by wild bees and moving branches, is not an ordinary experience. But for an experienced honey hunter, this is more than a challenge. It is a tradition. It is a skill. It is a connection with nature. And it is a way of life. The next time you see a small jar of honey sitting on a kitchen shelf, remember that honey can have a much bigger story behind it. Some honey comes from carefully managed farms. But somewhere in the world, there are still people entering forests, climbing enormous trees, facing wild bees, and collecting nature's golden treasure with nothing more than traditional knowledge, determination, and courage. And perhaps that is the most incredible part of this entire adventure. Not the height of the tree, not the number of bees, not even the amount of honey, but the human ability to look at something incredibly difficult and say, I know this is dangerous, but I have learned how to do it. This is the extraordinary world of extreme wild honey hunting, a world where the forest is the workplace, the bees are the guardians, the tree is the ladder, and the golden honey at the end of the journey is nature's reward. If you enjoyed this journey into the wild, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because there are countless incredible traditions around the world that most people have never seen, and this was just one of them. Until the next adventure, stay curious, respect nature, and remember, sometimes the most valuable treasures are hidden in the most dangerous places.